Hello, and welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. This is me and Lean from arsenalvision.co.uk. On the show today, we have Elliot, who is Yankee Gunner on Twitter. We also have James, who is Gooner Fanatic 49, and Paul, Pozzling in my pants. They talk about the Stoke game. But before that, I just want to have a few words about the Stoke game. Well, that's a complete lie. I don't really want to have a few words about the Stoke game because, well, I don't really like talking about Arsenal when we lose. But this is the thing about doing a post-match podcast. You have to face these things, and I didn't think about this at the time. Yeah, we were awful. We were really poor, I thought. That was by far, in my opinion, our worst performance of the season, especially the first half. I don't know what was going on with us at all. Obviously, our defending was poor from the very beginning, and we weren't very fluid going forward. They were quite obvious. But what I noticed was the fact that we weren't willing to make any challenges in the midfield area, especially the midfield area. The point in the first half, I need to watch it again. Why are we not tackling? Why are we not going into 50-50s? We'd lost every ball, and we just didn't really seem like we wanted to have to roll our sleeves up and fight. Maybe, I don't know if it's an excuse or if it's a fact or what. Maybe we've just played too many games in a short space of time with the players that we have available. Because only recently against Dortmund, for example, we were really high tempo, really committed to winning the ball back quickly and breaking fast, and it really worked. At West Brom, it was much of the same, and then we weren't quite as high tempo noticed against Southampton. So maybe the players we have don't have enough depth at the moment, or maybe not enough rotation. I don't know, but we just didn't seem up for it. I hear that a lot. When Arsenal lose a game, Arsenal fan TV, for example, you get so many fans saying, "Oh, there's not enough commitment. There's not enough. The players didn't want it enough, and all that." Yeah, you hear that a lot, and most of the time that's actually nonsense, really. But this time, it did seem that way. Maybe I'll go watch it again and see what happens. But that was really disappointing. That was, and just let the first half just go past us, and it was pretty feeble, really. Our defending was shocking. It's really weird though. In that second half, as far as I was concerned, Stoke went 4-0 up, and there wasn't a point where I noticed that the goal didn't count. I don't know if my stream went, if I turned away. I don't remember doing that. All of a sudden, it said 3-0 on the scoreboard. Why did it say 3-0? I thought it just was a mistake. I even posted a tweet on Twitter about it, a picture of the time. And then we scored 2 goals. It's really weird. So from 4 down in my head to like 3-2 down, I thought, right, we're 3-2 down now. We're going to go for it. We're going to get equalised. We might have a chance of winning the game. Then Callum Chambers got sent off for what looked like just a normal foul. Like, why is that a booking? Why is that a second booking? Why? It wasn't a second booking, and he knew that as well. But hey, who knows? But yeah, I know. Obviously, it isn't the referee's fault that we didn't win the game. Obviously, but it's just frustrating that after scoring 2 goals in a short space of time, had a chance to keep going and try and turn the game around, and that was taken away from us. But yeah, overall, it was awful. And I don't know what's next now, because we've got a lot of injuries at the moment. We can't rotate too much, and obviously we need to rotate, it seems. I think the players are doing too much, and it's taking its toll. Who knows? We're going to be rotating in midweek, that's for sure. Can't play all of our players in that game, in a game which doesn't really matter. I think we're qualified anyway. And see how things go after that. But enough whinging and moaning for now. I'm going to hand you over to the guys whose conversation's far more interested in my bleating. So here they are.
2 second-half goals put lipstick on the pig that was the Stoke performance. My name is Elliot Smith. You can follow me at Yankee Gunner on Twitter, and this is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast, post mass suicide podcast, potentially as well. We're recording directly after the Stoke game. We will try to keep it brief because there's not a whole lot of good things to say, and most of it's been covered in previous post-match recordings, unfortunately. We are joined as ever by the delightful and ever upbeat James. You can find him at GoonerFanatic49 on Twitter. James, welcome.
Yeah, delight to be here, Elliot.
As I imagine you would be. And once again, welcoming back Paul. I'm not in the mood to make the joke about his Twitter handle, so I'll just tell it to you. It is Poznan in my pants. If you want to hear the bad jokes I usually make, feel free to listen to any of our previous podcasts. So let's get into it right away. Usually we start with a man of the match. I don't think there's even a point in doing that. What I would like to do is talk about the first half initially and sort of who we think hurt us the most. And I'm going to give you players from which to choose, James. So of the 11 starters, who was most terrible?
It's very difficult to handpick a single individual given how poor the performance was from back to front. I mean, obviously looking at the lineup, one of the biggest issues going into the game was having to start Bellerin at right back and moving Chambers across to the centre. And without really trying to pick on the young kid, he really didn't have the greatest of games. And, even aside from his pure individual performance, I think that selection, or sort of forced selection, was really one of our major undoings, having gone into this game with three fantastic sort of defensively solid performances. It was such a shame to see the absolute opposite being put on display today. Even just seeing sort of Mertesacker, he looked like a completely different individual alongside Chambers compared to his last game when playing with Koscielny. I mean, the whole thing. I think just about everyone had a pretty poor game. But yeah, defensively, certainly was where most of the issues lay.
Yeah, Paul, I mean, I think it's fair to say the back four was a shambles. And interestingly, it was the Bellerin Chambers solution that some people were baying for when Monreal was being deputized at center back. And I think now we all wish Monreal was fit to play center back. But, I think we could point fingers at the midfield and at Olivier Giroud to some extent, and we'll get to that. But for you, I mean, do you think it was really Bellerin that cost us in the first half? Do you want to maybe put some of the extra onus on Chambers? What did you? I mean, Mertesacker didn't do himself any favors either. What did you think was most discouraging about the first half performance?
Oh, the horror. I really do think this is one of those games where you just can't pick one player, but you could pick them all. But certainly, if you look at the back five, for all the talk about Martinez, I'm not going to slam him at all. I think he's done great. But you could see even in the three goals, not that he could have stopped any one of them, but he could have been a little bigger in the defending of each one of those goals, stood up a little bit more. Maybe he would have got one of them. Maybe that confidence even from Martinez out to the other four players, or the lack of understanding, that lack of confidence. We've heard all these great speeches about Chesney is shite and he doesn't command the box. Well, was there any sense of command there today? Now, I'm not putting it on Martinez, but he was, if you look at the back five, Gibbs is Gibbs. He's solid. We love him, though. I think it was the second goal came from his wing, and we could have done with a better challenge there. But if you go across the other four, the back five, you got Mertesacker played out of position and without Koscielny can often look ugly, like really, really ugly. Chambers, we talk about his early red cards and leading to a suspension later on, 4 or 5 games or 6 games out. Well, we didn't have to wait too long for that. Bellerin, this was not the game you play Bellerin. I would have loved to have seen him against Montero, 4 or 5 games ago. But Jesus, now these changes were, I guess, forced. I didn't follow all the pre-match stuff, so I'm assuming Monreal couldn't play. I'm assuming, Koscielny's Achilles is in danger territory and they didn't have a lot of options. But this was just you can take 4 of the back 5. In other words, exclude Gibbs. Everybody else, had a horrible game. Didn't know each other. Hasn't played in those positions. I know that's not entirely true, but there's a certain amount of lack of confidence in each other, especially such a fall down from Mertesacker and Koscielny, and finally we've rediscovered ourselves and certainty of the back, and then 4 out of the 5 are either shuffled or just Bellerin against Stoke. What a mismatch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look,
I'll breathe now.
Yeah, I tweeted during the match that the mess at the back is a disaster of our own making, and it's well covered ground at this point. But unfortunately, every time it comes back to haunt us, it's hard not to acknowledge that we started this season without adequate cover at the back, and we knew it might cost us, and it is costing us. And so it seems redundant to continue to discuss it, but we're forced to continue to discuss it because it continues to cost us. Especially given that Koscielny's injury wasn't a surprise, it was known and it's chronic. I actually thought as much stick as Bellerin took, and I think it's deserved, I thought Chambers was really, really poor. And I think this is a reminder to everyone who thinks that Chambers is the future at center back, that as great as he's been at right back in the last few games, this is still a very young player. This is a player who's basically never played center back. And aside from being tall, we have no indication that he can play center back. And as Naveen, who was on the last podcast and likes to talk tactics and think about things slightly more intellectually than I do, because I just like to shout and get angry and be emotional. What you're doing when you bring Chambers in to keep Chambers on his preferred side is moving Mertesacker to an unfamiliar side. And, it's what happens when you move a right center back to left center back. And Mertesacker looked like a mess. And most people point to the fact that it's because Koscielny wasn't there. But I also think it's because he is never a left-sided center back. He's not. He looks very uncomfortable there. But I think if you look at the first half, Chambers sold Mertesacker short once. He just wildly missed the header for their first goal. Let's break down the second goal, though. Is there any – I think you can excuse lack of quality. You can excuse unfamiliarity. James, how do you excuse – not closing down the crosser and then Mertesacker and Flamini strolling as Bojan sort of glides by them for the finish? I mean, I'll always forgive a lack of talent because it's no one's fault, but how do you forgive that goal? Because it looked like a serious lack of concentration and effort.
First of all, I was trying to watch this game on some sort of like shabby stream that I found in the depths of Twitter.
Lucky you.
Probably for the best. So my actual the number of sort of replays and times I was able to see any of the goals wasn't particularly high. But I mean, it's why Gibbs wasn't pressing onto the crosser. I mean, not even you mentioned sort of Flamini and Mertesacker, their lack of ability to get back. I mean, the shape of the defense was shocking. I mean, at 1-0 down, I mean that's having already at least, I mean, I guess within the first 20 seconds can maybe talk about how the team wasn't switched on, which I mean in itself shouldn't be an excuse. But I mean, 20 minutes into the game to see the defense like that was outrageous. It was shocking. I mean, you look at that game and okay, obviously there was the 2 goals that we pegged back before Chambers got sent off, but even outside of the goals that we conceded, we could have lost that game fairly comfortably. I mean, the defense was a shambles. I can't give you a reason as to why. In particular, for that second goal, Flamini and Mertesacker were where they were, or why Gibbs wasn't pressing. But we clearly looked, we clearly just didn't have the same confidence in the back four as the previous couple of games, and that minor change really seemed to be much of our undoing, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things we saw today was Olivier Giroud, off the back of a super sub appearance, get the start in favor of Danny Welbeck, and it may have just been a case of just resting Welbeck. I mean, who has played a lot, and I think he was one of the players that Arsene Wenger said might be in the red along with Sanchez, but of course he was started. Paul, Giroud had the kind of day today that is why I get very frustrated by him. He'd collect the ball in positions where he could create a chance for himself and flick it to no one. It wasn't sticking. He was making the most of every contact and going down instead of, fighting to win the ball. He was shrugged off the ball too easily. And then, of course, with a chance to make it 1-1 with 80 minutes still to play, he misses arguably our best chance of the game, aside from the magic Sanchez work to create a chance he then spurned. What did you think of Giroud's performance? How big a miss do you think that first one was? And in general, how do you think his performance in the first half influenced the scoreline at halftime?
All right. So the 80 minutes was the header that.
Yeah, the far post,
Okay,
post header when I guess it was it Bellerin who showed the pace to get there? Maybe it was Oxlade-Chamberlain. I can't remember. Someone got to the end line and
Bellerin.
dug out across Bellerin, and he was free at the far post and headed it wide.
Yeah, that hurt. To be fair, though, all these unmissable chances, I think I've said this before, I think they're actually highly missable, and all sorts of good players miss them. But while I defend him there, I mean, overall he had a terrible game. I was very concerned when I didn't see Welbeck playing because of the pace, because of his physicality, because of his size. I would have loved to have seen our starting three be. It's really hard on Oxlade-Chamberlain, but I would have loved to have seen Welbeck, Giroud, and Sanchez as our front three, just because of who we were up against. Those a team full of yaks. I mean, at one stage, at whatever that was when they brought, was it Huth on at the end? I'm like, well, they've substituted their smallest player for a freaking yak, and that's who Stoke is. So I wanted to see Welbeck on for that reason and for pace. I thought Giroud, this was like one of his worst games, and I mean, overall I like Giroud, but I just there's a third of his game that's missing for me. That pace, that danger in behind that Welbeck can provide either alongside him or instead of him. And what you expect from Giroud is touches, flicks, connections, passes, hold up play, and he's not alone.
Don't forget dummies to no one. We saw that today.
Dummies
too.
to no one.
He pulled that one.
He had those going, but I'm not in a. I'm trying to hold back on our boys, but he was. I mean, nothing worked for him, especially in the first half. But anyway, nothing worked for him today.
And if we're trying to be fair to him, I think we can point to the fact that he is still back from a very, very long injury layoff. But if you're fit enough to start, you have to take responsibility for it. And it was a poor game, and the miss was not down to fitness. I mean, that miss is just something we've seen with Giroud from time to time, which is in the big spot with a chance to make an important impact. He's often failed to do it, and it's unfortunate that happened again today. One of the things we are trying to do on this podcast, and we will integrate this better hopefully in the future, is bring in some Twitter interaction. And we are using the hashtag Arsenal Vision Podcast. Arsenal Vision Podcast. So throughout the course of the match, if you want to tweet to that, we will look at your opinions or questions and then respond to them either with nodding agreement or ridicule. I want to turn it over to you, James, and Alan Rennie on Twitter, who has the bizarre Twitter handle Alan Rennie. That's AlanRennie. Basically says, we lacked fight and spirit in midfield. Flamini, Ramsey, and Santi had a terrible spine to play away to Stoke. And I think it's fair. Santi came alive in the second half, and I think that was as much a part of our resurrection as Welbeck's contribution and also maybe a little bit of fortune. But certainly in the first half and throughout the match, the midfield just once again didn't seem to function. I mean, James, is it time for us to start getting creative with a different midfield? I know you believe that Ramsey has been contributing more than I see, but based on the eye test, that midfield is not functioning. It's not linking up with the front three. At times, it was miles apart from the back four, and there was no link between the back four and the midfield to create attacks. What's your opinion of how the midfield functioned today, and is it time to start getting creative with alternatives there?
Well, firstly, the midfield was certainly supremely dysfunctional today. I mean, I think we've seen sort of patches of form from Santi and to a certain degree Ramsey, at least in my opinion. But they both regressed back quite significantly in today's game. And I think that was in part to do with just how poor the side was. I mean, to go down so quickly in the game, it's you know, was a big blow for us, and I don't think we responded to that well at all. Yeah, I mean, also you go to the Britannia Stadium and you have Flamini in the middle, who, you know, he talks a lot about, you know, Arsenal, you know, adding some sort of physicality to the side, but he is but a terrier. He's kind of an annoying yap dog who runs around a lot, and, you know, when he's playing well, covers various pockets of space in the defensive third of the Arsenal pitch quite well. But aside from that, he's not a particularly physical character, as feisty as he may be. Santi's far from it, at the sort of height of 5'7" or however tall he is. And I mean, even Ramsey, who you know, regardless of his performance, tends to put in a good shift and does add some sort of, I guess, defensive steel to the midfield. He's hardly a big lad, and we seem to be outmuscled in the middle. We seem to have a major disconnect between between sort of the back line to the midfield, to the forwards. There was, as you said, far too much space between the lines. I mean, the midfield was as bad as the defense was. I mean, the midfield was just as bad. Yeah, I mean, certainly after today's performance, you'd like to think that there would be some sort of creative solution to the otherwise uninspiring midfield, but you look to our current options on the bench, and I'm not sure, aside from maybe bringing in Rosicky for Santi, or being supremely creative and chucking Diaby back into the action. I just don't really know what else we can really do, since the team is kind of picking itself, unless you want to, you know, go to a more you can look to Joel Campbell and Podolski, etc., but they're more attacking options. Maybe bring Alex into the middle, but I don't think he's the type of central midfield that sort of midfielder that connects the defense to the attack. I think it was, you know, it's partly.
I mean, what about a Thomas Rosicky? I mean,
well,
you know,
yeah, I mean, I think
we did re-sign him.
We did re-sign him. I would be inclined to bring in Rosicky, but I would probably be more inclined to bring him in for a Santi than an Aaron Ramsey, personally. I think he suits that role far better than the kind of the deeper midfield alongside our defensive enforcer, where Ramsey plays.
I mean, is there any argument for, you know, moving Rosicky and Oxlade-Chamberlain in there and giving Cazorla and Ramsey a rest? Or
I mean, listen, there's an argument for it, yes, but I mean, as bad as today's performance was, let's not forget that playing in front of a defense that was as destabilized as it was, which is, you know, a major issue in this squad at the moment. Don't take me wrong, but we're still, you know, you still got to take into the account the previous games that we've played, and the midfield, albeit there's been certain individual performances that haven't been great as such, it was starting to look a lot better between sort of linking up the play to the forward. So I don't think just off the back of one loss we need to be making drastic changes. Certainly not in the midfield. I think the biggest issue for this midfield today was just how little confidence we were able to gain from such an unstable back line, and I think that just destabilized the rest of the team, and is part of why is, you know, partly to do with how poor nearly every single individual that put on an Arsenal shirt was today.
Yeah, Paul, you know, Arsene did make the halftime change. He took Bellerin off, which I thought was basically kind to the kid, but you wonder what his future, at least for this season, is now, and how the manager's going to trust him going forward. You know, I joked that Carl Jenkinson would have been useful this season, you know, but obviously I think the manager expected it to be Debuchy at right back and Chambers backing him up, which certainly begs the question who he thought was going to be backing up the center back, but that's another issue. As far as the second half goes, was the performance, I mean, it was better, but I think there was some suggestion that we played well the second half, and I'm not necessarily convinced we were. I think Stoke was happy to sit deep. I think that they lost their legs a little bit, as you'd expect. I think they were somewhat, you could argue, unfairly denied a fourth goal, because even though that's a borderline call, once that goal is given, it's very rare that you would see the referees confer and take it away. Do you think that the second half gave us reason for optimism coming off this? Was a ray of hope, or do you think it was sort of a false dawn? What did you take away from the performance in the second half?
No, I don't think it gave us any reason for optimism. But I'll blend that into your previous kind of trying to diagnose what the issue was question. I think another side, and imagine, I'm not talking about this year's Chelsea because they can actually be, their cover at the back once you get a few injuries is a little light too. A more robust team would have survived the first half by going down a goal or maybe two. We went down 3, and it could have been
almost
more.
4. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the issue here. For me, we talked about Bellerin, and I don't know that I put as much blame on Bellerin out of that whole morass of horribleness. And that's just talking about the defense, let alone the whole team.
No, for me, I think Chambers had a worse first half than Bellerin.
Yeah,
but I mean, neither.
And again,
shown.
It's part of a system, and how do if a few people have a bad game, but when everybody plays bad, I just you need a better mind than mine to really work out who the problem was, because it's a connected system. To me, the issue was we were so horrible at the back that a terrible, terrible first half, and lots of teams have terrible first halves where the passes go astray. We're playing at the Britannia. They're a big team. They actually played really well. Everything they did in the first half worked. That happens. The issue is that you go down 3 goals, and the other issue being horrible. But we should have gone down.
But is some of this Saturday, Wednesday, not using the squad better? I mean, does the manager have to look at the? I mean, I realized there was some rotation at the back, but that was more enforced rotation and not the kind we want to be making, frankly, because we don't have the ability to rotate there. But is Matthew Flamini someone who can play Saturday, Wednesday at the base of midfield? Can you justify, putting Alexis out there 90 minutes every single game, or even Aaron Ramsey and Sandy Cazorla? I mean, do you get a fresher, slightly better performance from hungry players who haven't been given their opportunity, and maybe, to your point, only go down a goal or 2, or maybe you ship 3 but score 1 and you are able to recover it? I mean, is this a fatigue and poor squad management issue?
Maybe, but Chelsea have played 7 or 8 players pretty much every game all season.
Well, their results have suffered, right? I mean, they have a 0-0 draw recently, and they lost at Newcastle.
Yeah, but they didn't go down 3-0.
Well, they're just a better. Those players that they're playing more frequently are better than the player. I mean, Matic is better than Flamini, and Cesc is better than everybody in the history of the universe. And you can go through the whole team, and Terry and Cahill, and if you're playing better players regularly, better players when fatigued will outperform lesser players when fatigued. I just wonder if some of this is fatigue.
In rotation terms, we've rotated them to death on a comparative basis. And while I think there's mileage in your point, I think that for me, right, we all come at this stage. We're mostly emotion about it, and we'll have a couple of days, and maybe we'll get a bit more logical. For me, the feeling I come away with was a more robust side would have rode out the first half and conceded 1 or 2 goals and played better in the second half. And unfortunately, we had kids in the back. People played out of position. 4 or 5 players either too, I'll use the term too young, but too young when you have 5 players who are too young, and if not, played out of position. And instead of going down 1 or 2 goals, they started really brightly, and we let in everything that came our way and went down 3 goals, could have been 4. And everybody else played horribly, and it all, stuff leaks from one side to the other, from the defense to the midfield to the attack. And you can have a horrible day, but if you're not robust at the back, you'll do an Arsenal and you go 3-0 down.
Well, and let's keep fingers crossed that Debussy and or Koss are fit next weekend, because Chambers won't be available. He picked up 2 yellows today. He now has more yellow cards than any Arsenal player had for the entire season last season, and the most yellow cards in the Premier League.
Well,
He obviously has some work to do on learning how and when to make a challenge. And that'll lead to the next point, James. There was some debate about his second yellow, whether it should have been a red. And a lot of people on the internet are having their usual go at Anthony Taylor. But I thought that Taylor did what Taylor does, which is he officiated poorly. Having said that, you could argue the two biggest calls he had to make in this game, a penalty shout for us and a goal, a potentially dubious goal for them, went in our favor. He gave us a penalty, which is 1 goal, and he chalked off a goal for them, which is 2 goals. So in my mind, yes, Anthony Taylor was poor today, but on the balance of it, it was a +2 goal swing for us with big decisions he made. You want to make any argument that Anthony Taylor cost us this game, or was the problem in this game, or you think we cost us this game?
No, I mean, Anthony Taylor had an absolutely appalling game, but I don't think he certainly wasn't the reason why we lost. In fact, I do tend to agree with you that the decisions that were the big decisions did go. I mean, the 2 big decisions did go slightly in our favor. Although I must confess, I still haven't seen the foul for the penalty, as my stream cut out for about 5 minutes.
I mean, it's
period.
arguably a penalty, but I think the point is, we've been denied arguable penalties plenty of times. People aren't happy with the Chambers second yellow, and some people wanted a red for Charlie Adam, which I don't think ever was really going to happen. But the point is that, we were +2 in goals on decisions that led directly to goals.
Right. I mean, listen, I do agree with you. I mean, he had a terrible game, but it's easy for us to want to find an excuse as to why we played so poorly, or why we incurred such demoralizing defeat. But I mean, you can't tie that into the referee's performance. Like, I mean, I would argue that neither of both of Chambers' challenges that gave him a yellow card could on another given day, he might have not even got a single booking. But I mean, I think that's completely irrelevant to sort of the shape of the game and the picture of the game, because this is something that's part of or seems to be part of the Premier League. And if you're talking about this from a Stoke fan's point of view, you came away with a win despite the sort of decisions that Taylor had made. I mean, I think I just don't think it's even worth sort of discussing the referee's decisions, because I don't think that was at all the reason why we came away with the loss.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And Paul, unless you have something to add about that with Anthony Taylor, I want to turn to the goals we scored in the second half really quickly, and our second half performance. I think the reason I am less enamored with our second half performance, and I don't necessarily see it as being a tremendous improvement, is, first of all, anything compared to the first half was going to seem like a tremendous improvement. But from a chance standpoint, I mean, if you look at it, we got a goal from a penalty, and one we deserved, and we got a goal from a nice swing of the boot by Aaron Ramsey on a corner kick. We didn't create anything from open play, really. We weren't peppering Begovic from open play with shots where he was their man of the match in the second half or anything like that. And we made a lot of sloppy mistakes in the second half. We had the Alexis Sanchez foul throw, which admittedly I didn't think was a foul throw. We had the offside from the short corner, which was a killer late in the game. We had, at the very, very end of the game, Santi Cazorla playing a pretty simple crossfield ball over the head of his intended target, who right now it escapes me who that was, and out of bounds for a throw-in. I mean, I still think there was a lot of sloppiness and frustrating play. I remember Gibbs on the overlap getting to the byline and just refusing to use his right foot so much that he carried it out for a goal kick. I mean, were you encouraged by the second half? I mean, look, you have to be encouraged vis-a-vis the first half, but were you encouraged by it, or did you find it sort of like I did, deeply frustrating due to some of the sort of silly mistakes we made when maybe a better team or a more clinical team would have made the comeback?
In the bigger picture, I didn't find it particularly encouraging. Obviously, we'll come out of today, instead of being at like DEFCON 5, we'll be at DEFCON 1, or maybe it's the other way around. Anyway, not quite as nuclear as we would have been, just because it came close. But I'm reminded of 2 of my own tweets. I know it's a terrible thing to be quoting yourself, but anyway,
I do it all
at
the
halftime
time.
I tweet, yeah. but it's not my fault. Sometimes I tweet great shit. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
couldn't argue with that.
yeah,
All right, go
yeah.
ahead. Promote yourself.
So
What'd you say?
at halftime, I tweeted, "This is going to be a hell of a comeback." It was kind of tongue in cheek, but you kind of felt it. But my issue at the second half was we had time at the end. We had 5 minutes of extra time. I have this picture of United Fergie practicing his Fergie time on the training ground. They're doing their aerial bombardments. We didn't really have you couldn't see an effective plan for those last 5 minutes of extra time. Chelsea got their 6 minutes. I don't know why they got 6 minutes. I don't know why we only got 5 minutes. But, you know, today Chelsea weren't very good in extra time. We really weren't very good. Now, we had only 10 men, but I'm not sure that's the greatest excuse on the planet because we didn't need to do any defending to talk about either. So I was pretty frustrated that our closeout game, our closing picture, if you want to call it, we just didn't have that game at the end. We were just making shit up and knocking in long balls against a big team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, look, there were a lot of wasteful touches as the game started to wind down, and it is what it is. I think we didn't create a ton from open play, and ultimately, when you fall behind 3-0, the margins for error are tiny, and we made a lot of errors down the stretch, even after we had hauled back 2 of the goals. So let's leave this game behind us, which is probably the best place for it. Except that from behind us, it can sneak up on us and kick us in the back. But and let's just really, really quickly touch on midweek against Galatasaray. Paul, stay with you for a second, then we'll go over to James just for a quick thought. I mean, the Galatasaray game arguably won't matter. It is as poor as Dortmund have been. It's hard to see them losing to Anderlecht. If you're the manager, you're putting on your manager hat right now. Are you going hell for leather against Galatasaray also because you feel like you need a good result to lift spirits after this? Or are you finally saying, to hell with that? I've got Newcastle, Liverpool, QPR, West Ham, tons of fixtures coming up in December. Rest Sanchez, who desperately needs it. Rest Welbeck. Give some guys a break. Which is the way you approach that game? Hell for leather or heavy rotation?
Medium rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Homer's middle, golden mean, play it down the middle. He's already said, I think, he's resting Sanchez. Joel Campbell hasn't seen the light of day. I always picture Thomas Rosicky playing in the Champions League anyway. It's time for some freshening up, a bit of a breather. We had 3 wins in a row. Maybe we'll hear a bit about tiredness today or whatever. It's not a great excuse, but maybe we'll hear something about it. I think it's time to freshen up.
To my point earlier, Paul, if you're worried about tiredness and you're going to blame a result on it, then it's incumbent upon you to put a team out there that you don't think will play like they're tired. But, it's another issue.
I agree with that. The comments I've seen so far, Arsenal hasn't used tiredness.
Okay.
So, but maybe it'll pop up there somewhere. I was expecting it, but I haven't seen it. But yeah, I think a healthy amount of rotation for Galatasaray, and Sanchez needs a breather.
What about you,
I don't know
James?
what we're going to do in defense, though. That's the only thing.
Well,
we don't have.
at least Chambers,
that's the real issue.
At least
we
Chambers
don't have a lot of options.
Yeah, because he won't be banned for Champions League, obviously, although maybe he can pick up a couple of yellows Wednesday and fix that problem. So, James, obviously it is a problem. Mertesacker's probably going to have to play again every match. You worry if something were to happen to him. Not that he's been brilliant, but it all starts to look like a house of cards. Are you rotating everywhere you can for Galatasaray, or do you think based on this now we almost need a good performance out there to get back on track?
Yeah, I think instead of this whole sort of buy all the players mantra, we're now moving to sort of rest all the players this Wednesday against Galatasaray. Mm-hmm. I think with regards to forwards and midfield, I think there's certainly enough quality and options available to us to be able to rest the majority of the players that have been starting fairly frequently over the last few games in those positions. So that doesn't worry me too much. As Paul mentioned, the issue really lies at the back. You could definitely play Chambers, given that he won't be available for Newcastle anyway. As you said, you're probably going to have to play Mertesacker still. I guess you give Bellerin a run out. He might as well play at right back. Maybe give Debussy like 20 minutes towards the end. And then at left back, was there a young player on the bench today who was able to play left back, or do you have to throw Gibbs in? I don't know. I mean, I prefer to see Gibbs on the bench, and even if it means sort of sacrificing the result entirely in Turkey, especially with the travelling that's involved. There's no point in worrying too much about this Galatasaray game aside from, hopefully avoiding some sort of thumping or humiliating defeat. I think it's just far more important for the team to be focused on Sunday on the Newcastle game next week, and rest up and be fully ready and raring to go for that.
Yeah, I think I got to agree with that. And look, I mean, the interesting thing is I think we're able to be circumspect about the Premier League season so far because of, frankly, how bad the league is. I wonder if this were a season where Liverpool and Tottenham and Everton were playing more like they probably could and have in seasons past, and we were already, 8 points adrift of fourth or 10 points adrift of fourth. I mean, we are on pace for something absurd like 52 or 55 points, something like that. I wonder what the mood would be and what the solution would be. But the reality is Spurs and Liverpool drop points again today. Everton probably are going to. United may tomorrow. But even if they don't, we're 3 points off fourth or 2 points off fourth, depending on what happens in the United game. So, and still ahead of Spurs and Liverpool and Everton in the standings. So the one thing that we can look at is, as bad as it has been, other teams have been worse. And with January around the corner, maybe there's a chance to fix it. I think we better leave it there, fellas. Once again, I want to thank James. Gooner Fanatic 49 is where to find him on Twitter. James, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Elian.
And again, Paul can be found at Positin in My Pants at Twitter. Paul, again, thanks
guys.
Yep. And, hopefully win on Wednesday, win next weekend, bring back the levity, and I can go back to making fun of Paul's Twitter handle. But until that time,
Yay.
We'll leave it there and hope for better things in the future. Once again, you can find us at Arsenal Vision's website or on iTunes, and we'll talk to you Wednesday. Cheers.